Welcome everyone to Talk Women's Rights Palestine. My name is Jessica Newworth. I'm the Director of Donor Direct Action, and we are an international women's rights project of Sisterhood as Global Institute designed to strengthen women worldwide, primarily through fundraising for women's groups on the front lines around the world, and increasing the visibility and trying to amplify the voices of incredible activists like Randa, Siniora, who is with us today from the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling. Randa is the executive director, and she runs an organization that's really, I think, one of the leading women's rights organizations in Palestine, does a fantastic job under very, very challenging circumstances, which you're going to hear about today. And we're delighted to have to speak with her, Maysoon Zayid, who is a brilliant comedian, actor, writer, disability advocate. And it's just an honor to have you with us. So I am going to leave it to the two of you to chat. We're going to have about 25 minutes of discussion, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So Maysoon, take it away.
Take it away. Hi, everybody. I am Maysoon Zayid. I am born and raised in the great state of New Jersey, but I am Palestinian. And every summer, whether it was rain, shine, or war, my parents sent me back to live in Palestine so that I wouldn't forget my roots. So it is very much near and dear to my heart. And I have the privilege today of having a conversation with the incredible Randa, who is in Palestine right now, which is where I wish I was. And we're talking about something that's very near and dear to my heart, extremely important, and something that I'm so proud Donor Direct Action has taken the time to empower and uplift, because I think that violence against women is an epidemic. It's a global epidemic, and women with disabilities like myself are 3 times more likely to face violence than their non-disabled peers. So the issue of violence against women is very important to me. It's something I believe we need to defeat. I think it's an epidemic that needs to be ended. And I'm really excited to learn more from Randa about what's being done in Palestine. Because I think that globally, when people think of Arabs, they think of us being oppressive of women. They think of violence against women being part of our culture. And that was certainly not the culture that I was ever raised in. And I'm very proud of the framing of this conversation as violence against women. And I want the folks who have joined us, who have taken the time out of their day to learn more about this, to make sure to replace the word honor killing in your vocabulary with femicide, or if femicide is too hard, I have cerebral palsy, I slur, it's very hard to pronounce these things. You can say VAWA, violence against women. There is no honor in killing. And when we frame a murder as honorable, we excuse the perpetrators of the crime. So words matter, whether you're using Arabic or English. Never, ever use honor killing. There is no honor in murder. I'm so excited to introduce Randa. And my first question for you is very basic. What led you to this work? Because it's exceptional to be a woman in your field, but to specifically focus your energy on violence against women, what led you to this place?
Thank you very much, Maysoon. It is such a privilege to be with you. I'm so honored today to be with you and share this conversation, which really is very exciting. And just before I start, I would like to send a general note to the founder of WICLAC, Maha Abu Daye, late Maha Abu Daye, who was my boss one time and a very close friend. I'm so happy that I've taken her path in doing human rights work, and in specifically focusing on gender equality and women's rights. I think because we are women and we are girls, and sometimes whatever how compensated we are, Maysoon, we always have to take into consideration that sometimes there's discrimination, or maybe most of the time there are discrimination against us only because we are women.
Yes.
And therefore we have to do all what we can. I do remember when I was even very young, a kid, I was really defying one of my father's cousins because he didn't want me to wear shorts. He didn't want me to play sports. And I wanted to defy him. Whenever I wanted to go somewhere, I made him see me on my way to whatever I wanted to go to do my activities, in order to tell him that I have rights as a girl, as a woman. So because we live in societies, all of them, Maysoon, not only ours, I do agree with you that violence is an epidemic, it's a global one, exactly like COVID-19. Maybe even COVID-19 is a period where we're seeing this pandemic, but then this is going to end. But violence against women requires a lot of efforts from all of us in order to fight against it. And that's why, Maysoon, I think in Palestine, everywhere in the world, it's a universal phenomenon. It's a universal problem that we have really to stand against and fight against, with all the brave women and men in our societies, with the young generation and with the older generation. We want really our daughters, our sons, everybody to get engaged in this fight against all forms of violence, including gender-based violence.
I think it's really important that you point out that being a woman is inescapable. You know, I'm a woman who is considered a woman of color. I'm disabled. I'm Muslim in America, where there's a lot of bigotry against Muslims. But the one thing that is consistent is the fact that I'm a woman, and that discrimination is very specific. But you mentioned something so important, which was COVID-19. And I want to know more about your organization's analysis report that specifically focused on the time during COVID-19, because although this pandemic seems like it's been going on forever, it's actually very new. And I'm impressed by the fact that you have research on this right now, and I'd love to hear more about it.
Yes, of course, Maysoon. We were really very ready, because an alarm, you know, we knew that during crisis, because we Palestinians live always under crisis.
Right.
From one crisis to another crisis, and you know that we're under Israeli occupation. That's something. So we are used to closures, restrictions of movement, situations of emergency. And as Palestinians, we can not also escape this very reality. So as we always have been ready, we had always a responsive plan to cases of emergency. At the very beginning of the lockdown, the Secretary General of the United Nations alarmed the world that there will be, he asked for stopping arms and ceasefire, but he also mentioned a very big threat, which is violence against women worldwide. And he said, now it's much danger, it's more danger for the women at home to
Why?
be and
Why
left
is
with
it more dangerous?
It's more dangerous because usually the little space that women have, Maysoon, to move between, to get out of the house with everybody, male and men, the family, and even sometimes the extended family being all around with no real space. You know, in our society, we have extended families, we have big families, but the space, we don't have special room for everybody. So the space of women is being intruded by the male being all the time in the house. It's venting when the men leave, either for work or to sit on coffee shops or whatever. And the women have some free time in the private sphere. Now with the COVID-19, women have been locked in, if you wish, with their abusers. And the possibility of leaving the house to ask for help and support becomes more difficult. The privacy is not available. So that's why we have to think of responsive measures to deal with this emergency situation.
I'd love to jump in, Rana, and just give a little perspective to anyone who might not know what it's like to be on the ground in the West Bank in Palestine. Women who do want to escape are trapped by the Israeli occupation in their little village. So like Bethlehem and Ramallah, they're only like 20 miles apart. So like if I was trying to escape an abuser, I would want to go to a place where people didn't know me, where the family couldn't find me. That is an impossible choice for Palestinian women whose every single movement is controlled by the Israeli government. So in addition to being trapped by COVID inside their houses, if they were able to even...
Also the difficulty was, we heard from many women, first of all, they could not use their mobiles. There's no privacy. And if they wanted to leave the house, again, you have to see the interplay or the related relationship between closures, restrictions of movement generally, and under COVID-19 specifically, with the Palestinians being in control, and the emergency community committees, all men, or that are known to the women in her own community,
right,
in the village or in her own neighborhood. So if she wanted to leave the house, they will ask her, and everybody can spread the word in a very small society like ours. So another constraint that this structured patriarchy and male domination, even in the emergency committees, which does not allow women to speak. I mean, while there has been 5 times call on our services, on our free helplines, and on our calls and so on. Despite that, the numbers are still very low compared to the actual situation and what was happening. We witnessed an increase. At the beginning, we didn't notice it because women were very much indulged in the household responsibilities.
Right.
Unpaid care roles, and in many of the economic hardships and protection of the members of the family from their traditional roles as protectors and caregivers. But then gradually, with the closure extended once and twice and 3 times, many of the women started to report, and they could not endure the already existing violence within the family. It's not like coming all of a sudden. The women are suffering from violence.
Right.
And the is there, but it has exacerbated, it intensified during COVID-19.
Yeah.
So we were there to women to help them, to provide consultation, counseling. They can call us, they can send us an SMS message, they can text us, they can try WhatsApp, they can use all the social media. Luckily, in our society, almost 65%, according to the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, women and men in our society use internet.
Access to the internet.
That helps a little bit. It helps
so
generally.
Women used to physically come to a shelter that you run. How has that changed?
I mean, yes, it has changed because also there has been at the beginning a little bit of a shock to us, and the official institutions had to have new instructions and measures set in place. And our initiative, which we made to contact with the women's organizations, different women's, and WICLAC, my organization, we tried to initiate some kind of measures because we are stigmatizing women who are asking for protection in our shelters. Now with the closure, it's more difficult, and with the lack of clear restrictions, and you had to go through also procedures, and you wanted to ensure the safety of other women at the shelter, victims of the violence who have been able to reach us. So we had to have clear instructions and measures, and we had to activate the national referral system to take into consideration the specificity of COVID-19 and the safety measures. And therefore, in late April, around the 21st of April, with an initiative made by the Ministry of Social Development, we were able to pass new instructions where we had it made clear that there should be a testing for COVID-19, and that if the woman was tested positive, then they have to have a safe place, taking into consideration their priorities, their needs, before being referred to the shelters. So it became even more difficult for women to ask for shelter and for our help. But we did not close our shelters. We couldn't close our shelters. We knew very well that it's the time when women need it more than ever. And that if a woman leaves her home in such emergency situation, difficult health condition, it is a very dire need that we should be ready for her and available. So we had to train our staff to deal with COVID-19. We worked with the medical relief committees in Palestine, also providing the medical committees that are available in order to provide training, online training to our staff to deal with cases of COVID-19, how to make quarantine for these women, how to deal with the limited resources that we have. And that's why our services and our needs we had to work, it started to be difficult to differentiate. We were working from home, but we were present in our shelters. We linked all our lines with our social workers who were ready day and night, 24/7, to provide all the services possible to women victims of violence, or at least to give her a word, to help her say a word on that. Or listen to our counseling to her, to our advice, what she can do, how she can prepare herself to leave the house, what to do at this situation, how can we be of help to her, and especially that the courts were closed and there was no access to justice as well. And although
the courts, yes, that's an important point that a lot of us forget, that the courts themselves shut down. So the legal protections have been stripped during this time.
And possibly sometimes if you go to the police and the family units at the police, they might tell you, Maysoon, the woman who is a victim, they might tell her, is it so urgent? And also we had a situation that all the alimony or the maintenance funds are not being paid. And under this situation, there are additional burdens of economic hardships on these women to get the maintenance for them and for their children if they're divorced or if they have a dispute with their husbands. So because there were instructions that nobody should be imprisoned because not paying their debts, it was also more difficult for the legal system in order to control that. And the victim was again another time women victims of violence.
And
the double jeopardy.
And there are sometimes children involved.
Always children involved, and this is really very clear that children also in our society suffer from violence. And we have clear statistics of our national survey, which was conducted in 2019 before COVID-19, which shows that 29% of Palestinian women have been subjected to one form or other of violence. 3 out of 10 married women, have been subjected to violence during the last 10 months, and children, and the disabled people as well, especially disabled women, the elderly, the sick, are a burden on the family. Also the problem emerged with many of the women with disabilities, or girls and boys with disabilities who have, especially mentally disabled, who had been released from their institutions, and the family do not know how to cope with it. This is another additional burden. Guess who would take the responsibility? It is the women.
The women.
You have to manage the house, manage the limited resources, live with your abuser, take additional responsibilities, take the responsibility of online education for the children. And with limited resources, even at home, we might not have enough computers to have all the children study online and so on. And this brought another additional tension to women, which reflected that very much in their calls to us on the helplines, to us or to other organizations who were providing this help online, or on the phones or mobiles and so on. So it is really additional burden. And the Ministry of Social Development registered in the first 4 months only cases of femicide, cases of suicide many women wanted to take off their life and end their lives. And while we have men also who are committing suicide, in the 20 cases registered in the first 4 months of the year, 16 of them thank God they have been able to be saved, but 4 paid their life for that. The reason for that was social pressures, violence against them within the family, or from their husbands or their fathers or the male members of the family. It was economic hardships, social hardships. For the men, it was because they were unemployed, they could not maintain their families and so on. They couldn't find jobs or whatever. But for the women, in most of the cases, they have been asking for, taking off their life because of that reason, or forced to take their life for pretext, as you mentioned, pretext of what they call it, and I don't consider it feminist at all to say it, the so-called unhonorable killings that are named or titled under honor killings. They're not honorable at all.
Before we get into femicide and that the murder of women by partners, by parents, by family members. I'm blessed and lucky to only know, and only is not the correct word. In my life, I've personally known 3 women who were murdered by their families. So when we have these conversations, it is absolutely stunning to me that in 2020, this is still happening. Now, let us be very, very clear. What is the Palestinian law position on the murder of a family member?
The problem, Maysoon, is that we have inherited very outdated laws from the previous rules over Palestine during the Jordanian rule and the Egyptian rule over Gaza and the Palestinian rule over the West Bank.
So
and
since 1993, we haven't changed the laws?
No, not even 90. Some of them have been changed, but those related to, for example, penal laws have not been changed. And I always say the penal law, the Jordanian penal law of 1960, goes back to a Lebanese law that has been taken from the time of Napoleon Bonaparte.
Wow.
Such an outdated law that gives, in my opinion, according to one of the feminists that always speaks about it, Ms. Nadira Kiverkian, always says the penal law gives 50% discount to men for the same crimes they commit compared to men. There's always way to give a lot of discretion to the judges, and there are means to maneuver around the law to consider the killing. At first it was considered legal or legitimate, if you wish, to kill a woman because of what the so-called honor killing. It was stipulated in the law. There has been amendments made by presidential decrees, but they were not sufficient. And until now, we don't have a law. We don't have a law. In one of the cases where a husband murdered his wife in front of his 5 children, he stabbed her with a knife several times in her body. He first got a very high ruling of 25 years, then it was reduced to 15 years. And then when it was taken to higher courts, like the Cassation Court, it was reduced to 7.5 years. And the initial ruling was only 1 year because it was called honor killing in the court. But then it was appealed and it was given the high court, but then it was returned by the low court and it was considered not murder, it was manslaughter. And they reduced the sentence. They gave the discretion for the judge to reduce the sentence from 15 years to 7.5. And that person who killed his wife murdered her, took only 7.5 years. That's one example.
One of the cases that made me furious and got me to be so committed to doing whatever I can to help WICLAC and the work they were doing is that in my own village, A mother and her sister murdered the daughter because she wouldn't marry the cousin, the daughter of the other sister. And the women were sent to jail. And I was so impressed that they were sent to jail. And 5 days later, they were sent home simply because one of the magistrates was from the village and they didn't want women from our village in jail. How could we put women from our village in jail? And they brought them home. So you're up against something huge, but I have two questions.
Sometimes, Maysoon, they make the younger child, somebody who is less than 15 years old, because of to murder his sister, because he will get a very low sentence that would not exceed 7 years. That is another way how they sometimes murdering of women takes place. But I want to mention something also. The story of Isra Ghraib last year, which has brought a lot of international attention and international, it became an international, regional, and national case, was a case of a young woman, artist.
Randa, yes, sorry, very quickly. Yeah. Full disclosure, I know her whole family personally.
Yeah, I mean, this woman had paid her life. She has been beaten to death. She has been sent to hospital. Being in hospital for a very long time, it did not help. They said that she had a devil in her. They used all the excuses and so on. She was such a beautiful woman inside out. We had to go out in the streets, all women saying that we are tala'at, we are going out. We want to stop violence against women. We want to stop the murdering of women directly or indirectly. You cannot abuse women to death. Only last week, Amal from the Gaza Strip, a 10-year-old woman, a girl, was murdered by her father, beaten to death because she wanted to see her divorced mother. He wanted to prevent the mother from seeing her children. And this young girl had to pay her life for that. 3 weeks ago, we had another woman who has been raped by 3 male members of her family. She's only 12 years old, a young girl, a child. So using and abusing women, the severest thing is to pay your life. But the more dangerous is that you are living in the circle, this
being tortured
circle of violence, and you cannot get out of it. We want the laws to protect us. The family protection law was initiated by WICLAC in 2004, and it was adopted by the whole women's movement. And until today, we are fighting to pass it. When the ministry wanted to pass it a month ago, through a presidential decree, because our legislative council is not convening, there has been a huge counter campaign against us. We have been attacked. We have been told that you are carrying Western agendas, that you are fighting. We had to go to the public prosecutor because there was incitement against us. We went to speak to the general public prosecutor to tell him, please protect the Palestinian women's rights. Bring in those who are inciting against us, making us to pay our life because we are fighting against violence in our society. They deny the fact that we live under violence. We had to go to the streets during COVID-19 to fight, to say no to violence against women, to ask for the protection that the law gives us to us, in order to say that we please provide the protection that we need. Because whether it's COVID-19 or it is natural, what happened during COVID-19, it's that we've seen it more. And they wanted to silence us. And what we did is a campaign against silencing us.
I think that they should arrest every single person that wants to silence you, because I have a really good feeling, bad feeling, that the women in their houses are experiencing a lot of violence, because the only people who would protest an end to the murder and violence against women, the rape of children, are people who are complicit in that violence. So for those who are framing this as a Western intervention, they need to actually be looked at themselves, because anyone who would advocate this is not East-West. This is not
Exactly.
Muslim, Christian.
Believe me, Maysoon,
Yeah.
Maysoon, it's not East-West, you know. What you see on the screen is a campaign which we did. It's Palestinian Women Against Violence. It's called Fada, which means space. We wanted some space. We wanted to ask Palestinian women in the West Bank, in Gaza Strip, in Jerusalem, inside the Green Line, inside Israel, all joint efforts in order to say, we are the voice of victims of violence. We have shown how women were covering the bruises during COVID-19. We said, no, you should not cover the bruises even during COVID-19. You have to fight against violence now, tomorrow, and always, because this is a phenomenon, it's a problem. It's an issue that makes duty bearers worldwide responsible for. It's not only Palestinian, but it has its own uniqueness in our context.
It's so unique. Yeah, it's so unique.
But it doesn't mean that it's only in our society.
No, it's not only in our society, but like you said, the challenges that Palestinian women are facing are really inconceivable to somebody who has lived in a privileged world where you're not also dealing with constant violence and occupation, unbelievable levels of poverty, lack of access to education. I mean, I find it, you know, so terrifying that when we talk about a lot of gender-based violence in Palestine, it's the family, it's the loved ones committing it, which is, you know, I before we send it to questions, because I think it's so important to let the people listening ask us, I have two final questions. One is, were Israt's murderers brought to justice? And two, what can we actively do to help WICLAC? Because you're doing such a beautiful job. You are, you know, campaigning to change laws. You're putting out literature, and you're doing the on-the-ground physical work of saving lives. So I'd like to know what we can do to make that work a little bit easier.
Actually, Maysoon, WICLAC and the Palestinian Forum to Combat Violence Against Women and the Women's Movement generally are following and monitoring the court sessions of Isra Ghraib and other selected cases very diligently. We are really present in every session, and we're trying to make sure that this momentum that we gained with the publicity of the whole society and the international community to the killing or murdering of Isra Ghraib, it does not fade. We have to, we wouldn't accept less than justice taking its course. And that is really through really pressuring all the time and not accepting any excuses, cultural, social, religious, whatever, all of them, under the pretext, everything. If they speak about whatever, they always say, we are adopting Western agendas. These are the product of patriarchy in our society that is very heavily entrenched, combined with colonial occupation and with all the intersectional discrimination at all levels, depending on if you're poor, if you're disabled, if you're old, if you are, the more you have these multi-layer oppression, the more you're suffering within that society. And because there are people who have the passion and believe in it, you know, Maysoon, if we don't believe in it and we don't take it as a very passionate matter, that is our life. We want a better life to our daughters, to our societies, to our society, to our sons, to our children. That's why we should fight all forms of violence in all means possible. And we expect the support of all those believers worldwide. We want the solidarity, we want the support, and we do not want to be stigmatized only as Palestinian women as being victims of violence. We are victims of violence. We are under multi-layer levels of violence. And this is what we made in the different infographics we made. We said we are having at least now 3 major layers of COVID-19, occupation, and patriarchy. But at the same time, without working hard to end all forms of discrimination, violence, without fighting for better legislation, without saying openly and not being, we don't want to get weak and afraid and retreat backwards because some people are attacking us, conservative elements in our society attacking us. We are dealing with lives of people. We know how much women are and girls are suffering in our society from gender-based violence, and therefore we should use all means possible in order to end this violence.
Well,
and we need people like you, Maysoon, to continue working with us, because you're a celebrity, and your stand-up shows are very important to bring in the messages a very nice way to the people.
You've got me for life, like a leech. And now it's time for some questions.
Thank you so much, both of you. What an amazing conversation. And I think it really helps people who aren't so close as you are to everything happening there, you know, the struggle for justice and the incredible accomplishments that WCLAC has made. And I just have to point out, with so few resources, you know, it's just a miracle how much Randa and her team have been able to do, literally saving lives. So we're going to open for questions and answers. Please type your questions in the Q&A box. But before we start, we really have a special privilege to meet Diala Shamas, who has joined us. And Diala is an incredible advocate in her own right. She's a lawyer at the Center for Constitutional Rights and has just done some amazing work already in her career. But I also want to introduce her as the daughter of Maha Abudaya Shamas, who was the founder and longtime director of WCLAC. So Diala, if you are on.
She is.
Let's give you the floor.
Hi.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, yes. Great to see you.
Good to see everyone. Hi, Maysoon. Hi, Randa.
Hi, Habibti.
Hi. How are you?
I won't take long. It's an honor to be here and to honor my mother's work and life with you all. Her feminism and her, share screen. Yes, that's my mom. Let me just try to figure out how to remove the screen from mine so that I can, Maha Budaya, it's my mom. And her feminism and vision have, those have had their institutional articulation at WCLAC, and also had all sorts of articulations in her personal life, of course. They've all endlessly inspired me and guided me in my own life and thinking. So really want to thank Donor Direct Action for elevating WCLAC's work. I think now more than ever, it's a time to elevate the voices of Palestinian women who are actually doing the work, when so often people end up speaking for us, even those who claim to be, quote, on our side, right? So I won't take much time. I just want to acknowledge the wonderful work that Randa and all the staff at WCLAC have been doing on so many fronts. Whether it's providing
I want to say, Daria, that we're walking on the same path, which Maha, my dear friend and previous boss and very special person to my heart, has set forth on the path for WCLAC and for the feminist movement in Palestine. So we all respect her. We always remember her. Every day I sit on her chair, I do remember many things that I learned from her, and I'm so happy to be continuing on her own path with my colleagues and friends of WCLAC on that path to protect and to promote women's human rights.
She really is legendary. I remember my first works in Palestine, and always people saying, Maha already built that wheel, follow Maha. So Allah yarhamha.
Thanks. And I want to I just also acknowledge that I know the work sometimes feels schizophrenic, Randa, and I know this because I had a front row seat, right? Like on a regular day, I'd see my mother, who'd be running from a shelter where she's just driven a woman from like Hebron to the shelter across multiple checkpoints, dealing with multiple jurisdictions, whether it's the Palestinian Authority or the Israeli military, to let that woman flee her abuser and get to safety. And then jumping on a conference call with international human rights advocates who really only want to speak the language of law and international treaties and are all feeling so far removed, to then coming home and being stopped at a checkpoint and harassed by soldiers, at the same time. So like all of this lives in individuals' lives simultaneously and in these overlapping ways. And I know it's a lot of work. And so it's really important to keep doing it. So thank you all. We also know that Palestinian women have always been at the forefront of the struggle for liberation and freedom. And we see that now. And I just also wanted to draw the audience's attention to another aspect that rarely gets international coverage, which is the grassroots mobilization work that I know you all have been very much supporting. Also, young women across not just the West Bank and Gaza, but also 48 Palestine have come together under the banner of Tala'at and have called out these multiple layers of patriarchy and occupation and apartheid, and really embodied some of the grassroots movement building that has really kind of that's called for and it's necessary in this moment in this time. So thank you all for continuing in this path of really not letting anybody be reductivist and participating in the path of or participating in the dehumanization that also happens when you only focus on one aspect, right? If you only want to talk about Palestinian oppression at the hands of the occupation or Palestinian women's oppression at the hands of Palestinian men, like that all is also a form of dehumanization and another big part of the struggle. So thank you all, and thank you, Jessica, for creating these forums.
Well, it's
Zoraida is sending her regards to you.
Yeah. I think Maha, I think anybody who ever met Maha, she just has such a powerful impact. And Diala's the same way. And Randa too. I saw Randa last year at the Security Council, just taking it by storm. And it's just wonderful, to see that work. But it's so hard. And I think that, what I want to do, because we're running out of time, is end with a question for Randa to just tell us, like, what do you need? I know that you need resources and that funding is so scarce. So what are the things that you could do if you just had a little bit more capacity that you're not able to do now? Maybe just give us a little sense of that.
I think we need the solidarity and support of our friends and partners like Donors Direct Action and other individuals or groups who believe in what we do. And we want them to do that in partnership and in love for a better world, for a good society to live in, and not only just, we want to build good contacts with the people who believe in our cause. And we want you to support us in our work in Palestine, to look at the complexity of our situation, how this is really affecting the lives of young girls and women in our society, and how we can together work for a better world to everybody, to Palestinian women here. In this situation, we're talking about Palestinian women living in freedom, under their own state, in peace, and enjoying life after COVID-19, hopefully for everybody, but also ending the conflict and having our right to self-determination. We want all the support, especially now, because also the implications of the annexation on us is going to be, as women, is going to be much more detrimental, because this is illegal under international law, and it should not be acceptable by the international community. And at the same time, we want not to forget about the social agenda, the discrimination under which we live under our own society, and the interplay between them so strong. So, for example, just a quick one, polygamy is very high in the Jordan Valley because women are the breadwinners who work in illegal settlements, and the husbands take more than one wife. So you can see how patriarchal male domination and structures impact also with the occupation, and that is really a very strong thing. So we want people to believe in our cause, in our right to live with dignity, and that we to have the right to justice and a better life. So anybody who believes in our cause should join efforts with us in order to support us.
Thank you so much. And really, I know that at a very concrete level, it's like more funding for WCLAC means more lawyers, more shelter capacity, and literally more lives saved and more justice. So I hope everybody will make a contribution to support your work. 90% of all contributions go straight to WCLAC through a regrant. So the website is here. And unfortunately, we are out of time, but I really want to thank Randa.
Jessica, can we make sure to please send that link to everyone who is watching, because sometimes they forget, but if we could thank everyone who tuned in today to listen to this conversation by sending them an email with that link, I think that'd be great.
I want to thank Maysoon also, Jessica. I want to thank you very much also for all the support and all the opportunities you open for us. And I want to have a special thank for Maysoon for being with us today for this wonderful conversation. And hope to see you soon in Palestine.
Inshallah, inshallah.